Danny Cole was chopping firewood when the sky split open with light. He stopped mid-swing and looked up, watching a streak of fire race across the evening sky like a falling star that had forgotten how to fall gracefully. The object disappeared behind the tree line about 2 miles north of his cabin, and a moment later he felt the ground shake beneath his boots. He stood there for a long moment, axe still in hand, staring at the thin column of smoke rising above the pine trees. His first thought was that it was a meteor or maybe some piece of space junk falling back to Earth. His second thought was that he should call someone. His third thought, the one that actually moved his feet, was that someone might be hurt out there. Danny had been a paramedic for 23 years before he retired and moved out to this cabin in rural Montana. His wife had loved this place. They had planned to grow old here together, but cancer had taken her 3 years ago, and now Danny lived alone with his memories and his routines. Chopping wood, fixing things that did not really need fixing, trying to fill the quiet hours until sleep came. He grabbed his flashlight and his first aid kit out of habit, then started walking toward the smoke. The forest was thick here, and the evening light was fading fast. By the time he reached the crash site, full darkness had settled over the mountains, and his flashlight was the only thing cutting through the black. What he found made him stop breathing for several seconds. It was not a meteor. It was not space junk. It was a craft of some kind, small and sleek, about the size of a pickup truck. The material looked like nothing Danny had ever seen, a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The thing was half buried in the earth, surrounded by broken trees and scorched ground, and thin wisps of smoke curled up from cracks in its surface. Danny approached slowly, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He walked around the craft, looking for any markings or signs of what it might be. He found nothing familiar. No flags, no letters, no numbers, just smooth dark metal and strange angles that hurt his eyes if he looked at them too long. Then he heard the sound. It was faint, barely more than a whisper, but it was unmistakably a voice. Someone was inside that thing, and they were still alive. Danny found what looked like a hatch on the side of the craft. It had been torn partially open by the impact, and he was able to pry it the rest of the way with his hands. He shined his flashlight inside and felt his whole understanding of the world shift beneath him like sand. She looked almost human, almost but not quite. Her skin was a pale blue-gray color, smooth and soft-looking. Her features were delicate, with high cheekbones and a small nose and lips that could have belonged to any young woman on Earth. But her eyes were too large, too dark, like pools of black water that reflected the flashlight beam. And her hair, if it could be called hair, was more like fine silver threads that spread across the floor beneath her head. She was young. That was the thing that hit Danny hardest. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, she was young. Maybe 16 or 17 by human standards, though he knew that comparison might mean nothing. And she was hurt, badly hurt. Silver blood pooled beneath her body, leaking from wounds on her side and her leg. Her breathing was shallow and fast, and her skin had a grayish tint that Danny recognized as shock. She looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes, and he saw fear there. Pure, animal fear. She tried to move away from him, but her body would not cooperate. A small sound escaped her throat, something between a whimper and a word. Danny held up his hands, showing her they were empty except for the flashlight. He spoke softly, the way he used to speak to frightened patients. He told her his name. He told her he was not going to hurt her. He told her he wanted to help. He did not know if she could understand him. He did not know if his words meant anything to her at all. But something in his tone must have reached her, because she stopped trying to pull away. Her eyes stayed fixed on his face, watching him with an intensity that made him feel like she was looking straight through his skin and into whatever lay beneath. Danny knew he should call someone. He should call the police or the military or someone who knew how to deal with things like this. But he also knew what would happen if he did. Men in suits would come. Scientists would come. She would become a specimen, a subject, a thing to be studied and dissected and locked away. And she would probably die before any of them figured out how to help her. Danny had spent his whole career saving lives. It was the only thing he had ever been good at, the only thing that made him feel like he mattered. And right now, looking at this strange girl bleeding out on the floor of her ruined ship, his instincts were screaming at him to do what he had always done. He made his decision. Danny climbed into the craft and knelt beside her. He examined her wounds as best he could, noting that her blood was silver but her flesh looked similar enough to human tissue. He tore strips from his shirt and pressed them against the worst of the bleeding. She winced but did not pull away. Her eyes never left his face. When he was sure he could move her without causing more damage, Danny lifted her carefully in his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like her bones were hollow. He carried her out of the wreckage and into the cool night air, then began the long walk back to his cabin. The girl drifted in and out of consciousness as he walked. Her head rested against his shoulder, and he could feel her breath against his neck. At one point, she stirred and looked up at him, and her lips moved to form a single word. "Please." The word was clear and perfect, spoken in English with no accent at all. Danny looked down at her in surprise, but her eyes had closed again and she was still. He walked faster. By the time he reached his cabin, his arms were aching and his legs were burning. He laid her gently on his kitchen table and turned on every light in the house. Then he gathered every medical supply he had and got to work. He did not know what he was doing. He did not know if anything he tried would help or hurt, but he knew he could not let her die, not without trying, not without giving her every chance he could. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and somewhere among them was a world that had lost a daughter. Danny did not think about that. He did not think about what her people might do when they found out what had happened. He thought only about the next stitch, the next bandage, the next breath. He thought only about keeping her alive. The night stretched on forever. Danny worked by the harsh light of his kitchen lamps, his hands steady even when his mind was racing. The girl lay on his table, pale and still, her silver blood staining the wood beneath her. He had seen hundreds of trauma patients in his career, but nothing had prepared him for this. Her biology was different, but not as different as he had feared. She had bones that could break and blood vessels that could leak. She had a heart, though it sat on the right side of her chest instead of the left. When he pressed his fingers to her neck, he found a pulse, weak but present, beating in a rhythm slightly faster than a human heart would beat. The wounds on her side were the worst. Something had torn through her flesh, leaving jagged gashes that went deep into the muscle beneath. Danny cleaned them as best he could, picking out small fragments of dark metal that must have come from her ship. She whimpered when he worked, a soft sound that cut through him like a knife, but she did not wake. He stitched her wounds with the supplies from his first aid kit. The needle and thread were meant for human skin, but they seemed to work well enough on hers. Her flesh was slightly tougher than human flesh, with a texture that reminded him of soft leather. The stitches held and the bleeding slowed, and Danny allowed himself to breathe. The leg wound was simpler, a deep cut that had missed the major blood vessels by inches. He cleaned it and stitched it and wrapped it in bandages, then turned his attention to the smaller injuries. Cuts and scrapes and bruises that covered her arms and face, evidence of a crash that should have killed her. By the time he finished, the first gray light of dawn was creeping through his windows. Danny washed his hands in the kitchen sink, watching her silver blood swirl down the drain. His back ached from bending over the table for so many hours and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. But she was still alive. Her breathing had steadied, and some color had returned to her blue-gray skin. He sat down in a chair beside the table and watched her sleep. In the soft morning light, she looked even more human than before. If not for the color of her skin and the strange silver quality of her hair, she could have been any young girl recovering from a terrible accident. Danny wondered where she came from. He wondered if she had a family who was looking for her. He wondered what kind of universe existed beyond the sky he had stared at all his life. She woke around noon. Her eyes opened slowly, those enormous dark pools finding focus on his face. She stared at him for a long moment, confusion and fear flickering across her features. Then memory seemed to return, and her expression softened into something like wonder. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a croak. Danny brought her water, holding the glass to her lips and helping her drink. She swallowed carefully, then tried again. "Where am I?" Her English was clear but halting, as if she had to search for each word before speaking it. Danny told her she was in his cabin, in a place called Montana, on a planet called Earth. She nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she already knew. "You saved me." It was not a question. Danny nodded and something changed in her eyes. The fear faded, replaced by a warmth that made his chest tighten. She told him her name was something long and musical, full of sounds his mouth could not make. When he asked what he should call her, she thought for a moment and then said. It was close enough to her real name, she explained, and easier for human tongues. Over the next few hours, as drifted in and out of sleep, Danny learned her story. Her people were called and they had been watching Earth for many years. They had learned human languages by listening to radio and television signals that leaked out into space. They were at war with another species called a conflict that had been raging for generations, had been on a transport ship, fleeing to a safe world when their convoy was attacked. She was the only survivor. Danny listened without interrupting. He had 1,000 questions, but he could see how tired she was, how much effort it cost her to speak. So he let her rest and he let her talk when she was able, and slowly the picture of a vast and dangerous galaxy took shape in his mind. In return, Danny told her about himself. He told her about his years as a paramedic, about the lives he had saved and the ones he had lost. He told her about his wife, about how they had met in high school and married at 20 and spent 30 years building a life together. He told her about the cancer that took her and about the empty years that followed. Listened with those huge dark eyes, and even though she came from a world beyond the stars, Danny felt like she understood. Loss was loss, no matter what planet you came from. Grief was grief. Loneliness was loneliness. As night fell again, conditions stabilized. She could sit up a little, propped against pillows Danny had brought from his bedroom. She could eat small amounts of food, though she seemed confused by most of what he offered. Plain rice and boiled vegetables were the only things that did not make her wrinkle her nose. They talked late into the night, two strangers from different worlds finding common ground in the simple act of conversation. Told him about her home planet, a world of vast oceans and floating cities. Danny told her about Montana, about the mountains and the forests and the way the snow looked in winter. She said it sounded beautiful. He said so did her world. Near midnight, reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were long and thin, and her skin was cool against his. She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You should not have saved me," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but there was something beneath it that sounded like fear. "They do not leave survivors. They do not leave witnesses. When they find out I escaped, they will come looking for me. And when they find me here, they will kill you too." Danny looked at her hand in his. He thought about all the years he had spent alone in this cabin, all the quiet nights with nothing but memories for company. He thought about his wife, about what she would have done if she had found a scared and wounded girl in the forest. He squeezed his hand gently and smiled. "Then we will deal with that together," he said. "Too late to change anything now." Stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, a small smile appeared on her face. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it transformed her features into something almost heartbreakingly lovely. "You are a strange creature, Danny Cole," she said. Danny laughed softly. "You have no idea," he replied. Outside, the stars burned in the darkness, and somewhere among them, hunters were already beginning to search. 3 days passed in a strange kind of peace. Grew stronger each day, her wounds healing faster than any human wounds would have healed. By the third morning, she could walk on her own, though she still moved slowly and carefully. Danny watched her progress with a mixture of relief and wonder. They fell into a routine. Danny would wake early and make breakfast while slept. She needed more sleep than humans did, she explained, especially while her body was repairing itself. When she woke, they would eat together and talk. In the afternoons, Danny would show her things from his world while she rested on the old couch in his living room. He showed her music first. He played records from his collection, old songs from artists she had never heard of, and watched her face as she listened. She seemed fascinated by the sounds, by the way human voices could carry such emotion. She told him they had music too, but it was different, more structured, less raw. He showed her photographs of his wife, studied them carefully, asking questions about her life and her death. Danny found himself talking about things he had not talked about in years. The way his wife had laughed, the sound of her voice in the morning, the way she had held his hand at the end when words were no longer enough. Listened to all of it. She did not offer empty comfort or hollow words. She simply listened, and when he was done, she told him that his wife sounded like someone worth remembering. He taught her how to make coffee. She did not like the taste at first, her face twisting in a way that made Danny laugh. But she kept trying, sip by sip, until she admitted that there was something oddly comforting about it. Danny told her that was the point. In return, told him about the galaxy. She told him about the dozens of species that lived among the stars, each with their own worlds and cultures and histories. She told him about the great alliances and the ancient wars. She told him about a species of warriors who lived only for conquest and cared nothing for mercy. She told him that humans were considered primitive by galactic standards. Earth had been observed for many years, but contact was forbidden. The belief that young species needed to develop on their own, without interference from more advanced civilizations. Danny found this frustrating, found his frustration amusing. On the third evening, everything changed. Danny was in the kitchen preparing dinner when appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, even paler than usual, and her dark eyes were wide with fear. "My ship," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Something is wrong." Danny followed her outside into the fading light. They walked toward the crash site, leaning on his arm for support. When they got close enough to see the wreckage, Danny noticed a faint light pulsing from somewhere inside the ruined craft. Stopped walking, her hand tightened on his arm. "The emergency beacon," she said. "I thought it was destroyed in the crash, but it is transmitting." She looked at him and the fear in her eyes cut through him like ice. "Both thee and my own people will detect that signal. They will come to kill me. My people will come to contain the situation. Either way, you are in danger now." Danny asked her what they should do, shook her head. She did not know. The beacon could not be disabled without tools she did not have. All they could do was wait and hope that her people found her first. They went back to the cabin. Danny checked his hunting rifle, an old weapon he used for deer season. He knew it would be useless against whatever was coming, but holding it made him feel slightly less helpless. Watched him without speaking. The silence between them was heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. They arrived at dawn. Danny heard the sound first, a low hum that vibrated through the walls of the cabin. He went to the window and looked out at a ship descending through the morning mist. It was larger than his craft, dark and angular, and somehow wrong in a way that made his stomach clench. The ship landed in the clearing in front of his cabin. A hatch opened, and 3 figures emerged. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with bodies covered in dark armor that looked like it had grown rather than been made. They had too many limbs, 4 arms and 2 legs, and their heads were elongated with multiple eyes that gleamed like black gems. They moved with a strange fluid grace, their limbs bending in ways that no human limb could bend. Whispered, she had come to stand beside him at the window, and her voice shook with fear. Danny had never seen her so afraid. They fanned out across the clearing, searching the area with careful, methodical movements. One of them approached the crashed ship and examined it. Another began walking toward the tree line. The third, the largest of the 3, turned its head toward the cabin. For a long moment, nothing happened. They stared at the cabin with those glittering eyes, and Danny stared back through the window. Then the creature began walking toward them with slow, deliberate steps. "You have to run," said. Her voice was urgent now, desperate. "Leave me here. They want me, not you. If you go now, they might let you live." Danny looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, the certainty that she was about to die. He saw the way she was trying to push him away, to save him from the consequences of his own kindness. He thought about his wife. He thought about all the nights he had spent alone in this cabin, wishing he had someone to protect, someone to care for. He thought about the moment he had found in that crashed ship, bleeding and afraid, and reaching out to him with those enormous eyes. "No," he said simply. Stared at him. "You will die." Danny picked up his rifle and checked that it was loaded. "Maybe," he said, "but I did not spend 3 days keeping you alive just to hand you over now." Before it could respond, the front door of the cabin exploded inward. The largest stood in the doorway, filling the frame with its armored body. Its multiple eyes fixed on Danny, then on, and a sound emerged from its throat that might have been speech or might have been a growl. It stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under its weight. Danny raised his rifle, knowing it was pointless, knowing he was about to die. But he did not back away. He did not lower his weapon. They looked at him, at his tiny human weapon, and made a sound that could only be laughter. Danny looked back at it and did not flinch. Behind him began to weep. They filled the doorway like a nightmare-given form. Up close, it was even more terrifying than Danny had imagined. Its armor was not armor at all, he realized, but some kind of natural shell that covered its body like the carapace of an insect. Its multiple eyes glittered with a cold intelligence, and when it spoke, its voice was like stones grinding together. "Give us the," it said. The words were broken and harsh but understandable. "Then you die quick. Fight, you die slow." Danny did not lower his rifle. His hands were steady, though his heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Behind him was trying to push past him, trying to get between him and the "I will go with you," she said. Her voice was shaking, but there was steel beneath the fear. "Just do not hurt him. He is nothing. He knows nothing. Leave him alive and I will not resist." They made that grinding sound again. Its eyes moved from to Danny and back again. It seemed amused by the situation, by these small, weak creatures making demands and offers. "No witnesses," it said. "Law, all who see us die. The primitive dies. This is how it has always been." It took a step forward, and Danny fired. The bullet struck thee in the chest and bounced off its natural armor like a pebble thrown at a tank. The creature paused for a moment, looking down at where the bullet had hit, and then it looked back at Danny with what might have been curiosity. "Interesting," it said. "You fight. Primitives usually run." Danny worked the action of his rifle and fired again. This time he aimed for the eyes. The bullet came closer to doing damage, but it turned its head at the last moment and the shot went wide. Behind the first, the other two entered the cabin. They spread out, flanking Danny and cutting off any chance of escape. Danny felt his hope dying with each step they took. Then grabbed his arm. "The kitchen," she whispered. Her eyes were wide, but there was something in them that had not been there before. Something like a plan. "You're cooking fuel. The gas." Danny understood immediately. He had a propane tank hooked up to his stove, a big one that he had filled just last week. If he could get to it, if he could find a way to ignite it, maybe he could buy them some time. He grabbed his hand and ran. They were fast, but they were not expecting him to move toward them. Danny ducked under the reaching arms of one of them and pulled through the kitchen doorway. He kicked the door shut behind them, knowing it would not hold for more than a second or two. "The propane line," he said, "already moving. Help me." Together they tore the gas line from the back of the stove. Danny could hear the breaking through the kitchen door as propane hissed into the air. He grabbed and pulled her toward the back door of the cabin, the one that led out into the forest. "Cover your ears," he said, and then he turned and fired his rifle into the cloud of propane. The explosion was enormous. Fire bloomed through the kitchen like a living thing, and the force of the blast threw Danny and through the back door and out into the yard. Danny rolled to his feet, his ears ringing, his vision blurred by smoke and light. Two of them stumbled out of the burning cabin. Their armor was scorched and cracked, and one of them was missing part of an arm. They were hurt, but they were not dead, and they were angry. "Run," Danny said, grabbing his hand again. They ran into the forest. Danny knew these woods better than anyone, had walked them 1,000 times over the years. He led through the thickest parts, where the trees grew close together and the undergrowth was dense. Behind them, he could hear the crashing through the brush in pursuit. Was slowing down. Her wounds had not fully healed, and the explosion had taken a toll on her weakened body. Danny half-carried her, his arm around her waist, forcing her to keep moving even when her legs wanted to give out. "They move in patterns," gasped, "hunting patterns. They will try to surround us, cut us off." "Then we need to surprise them," Danny said. He had been a paramedic, not a soldier, but he had grown up in these mountains, and his father had taught him how to hunt and how to trap. He knew how to read the land, how to use it to his advantage. He found what he was looking for in a narrow ravine. A tall dead tree, weakened by rot, leaning against a boulder at a dangerous angle. Danny propped against the ravine wall and went to work. When the first came through the ravine, Danny was ready. He pulled the rope he had rigged and the dead tree fell. They tried to dodge, but it was moving too fast. The tree struck it squarely, and the weight of the impact drove the creature to the ground. Danny heard its armor crack, heard the wet sound of something breaking inside. They did not get up. One down, Danny thought. His hands were shaking now, the reality of what he had just done hitting him. He had killed something, something intelligent, something alive. No time to think about that. The other two were still coming. He grabbed and they kept running. The forest grew darker as they went deeper, the trees blocking out the fading light. Danny's lungs burned and his legs ached, but he did not stop. They ran until they could not run anymore. They came to a place where the land dropped away into a steep ravine, too deep to climb down, too wide to cross. They were trapped. Danny turned to face the way they had come. Slumped against his side, her breathing ragged, her eyes half closed. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am sorry I brought this on you." Danny did not answer. He raised his rifle and waited for the to come. He did not have to wait long. The two remaining hunters emerged from the trees, moving slowly now, cautiously. They had learned to respect this primitive human who had already killed one of their number. Then the sky lit up with light. Danny looked up as ships descended through the clouds. They were sleek and silver, beautiful in a way the ships were not. They moved with a grace that took his breath away. Looked up too, and Danny saw something flicker across her face. Not relief, something closer to fear. "My people," she said quietly, "they found me." Danny should have felt happy. They were saved, but would be defeated. But his expression told him that this was not the end of their troubles. It was only the beginning. The ships descended like silver birds, their sleek hulls catching the last light of the dying sun. Danny watched them come, his rifle still raised, his body still braced for a fight that was no longer his to fight. The two remaining saw the ships as well. For a moment they hesitated, their multiple eyes flickering between Danny and the descending vessels. Then they made a decision. They turned and ran, crashing through the forest toward their own ship. They did not get far. Beams of light lanced down from the ships, bright and precise, and fell without a sound. Danny watched them die and felt nothing. Maybe later the weight of it would hit him, but not now. The largest ship landed in a clearing near the ravine. A hatch opened and soldiers emerged, tall and graceful with the same blue-gray skin as. They wore armor that looked almost organic, fitted perfectly to their slender bodies, and they carried weapons Danny could not identify. Behind the soldiers came another figure. A female, taller than the rest, with silver hair cut short and eyes that burned with authority. She walked like someone used to being obeyed, and the soldiers parted before her like water flowing around a stone. Straightened up beside Danny, her hand found his and squeezed tight. "First Admiral," she said quietly, "my people's military commander." Approached them with measured steps. Her eyes moved from to Danny, studying them both with an intensity that made Danny feel like he was being weighed and measured. Said, her voice was cool and formal, "Your father has been searching for you since the convoy was destroyed. He will be relieved to know you survived." Bowed her head slightly. "I would not have survived without this human," she said. "He saved my life. He fought to protect me." Eyes turned to Danny. She studied him for a long moment, and Danny forced himself to meet her gaze without flinching. "I see," said, "that creates certain complications." She turned to her soldiers and spoke in a language Danny did not understand. The soldiers moved to secure the area, checking the fallen and scanning the forest for any remaining threats. When she was satisfied, turned back to face Danny and, "You are aware," she said too, "that contact with primitive species is strictly forbidden. The penalty for such contact is severe, both for our people and for the primitives involved." His hand tightened on Danny's. "I am aware," she said, "but the circumstances were exceptional. I was dying. He saved me without knowing what I was or where I came from. He risked his own life to protect me." Was silent for a moment. Her expression revealed nothing. "The standard protocol," she said finally, "is to remove the memories of any primitives who witness our existence. In extreme cases, other measures are taken to ensure silence." Danny felt something cold settle in his stomach. He understood what those other measures meant. "I will not allow that," said. Her voice was harder now, stronger than Danny had ever heard it. "This human showed me kindness when he had no reason to. He fought impossible enemies for a stranger. He risked everything for someone he did not even know. If my people cannot recognize the value of such actions, then perhaps our isolation policies deserve to be questioned." Raised an eyebrow, strong words from one so young. "I am the daughter of council elders," said. "My words carry weight." The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. The soldiers watched in silence, clearly uncertain how this confrontation would end. Studied for a long moment, then her gaze shifted back to Danny. "You," she said, "human, tell me why you helped her, tell me the truth." Danny thought about the question. He thought about all the reasons he could give, all the explanations he could offer. He thought about his wife and his empty years and his life of saving lives. In the end, he gave the only answer that mattered. "Because she was hurt and she was scared and she needed help," he said. "Where I come from, that is enough. You do not ask what someone is before you help them. You do not ask where they come from or what they can give you in return. You see someone in trouble and you help. That is what it means to be human." Stared at him. Something shifted in her expression, something Danny could not quite read. "Remarkable," she said quietly. "Your species is considered primitive by galactic standards. Your technology is crude. Your history is violent. And yet you speak of compassion as if it were the most natural thing in the world." "It is," Danny said simply. "At least it should be." Silence fell over the clearing. The soldiers watched their commander, waiting for her decision. Stood beside Danny, her hand still in his, her eyes fixed on his face. Finally spoke. "I'm going to make a decision that bends our laws," she said. Her voice was formal, but there was something warmer beneath it. "This human will be allowed to keep his memories. He will be given a means to contact our people if he ever needs assistance. In return, he must keep our existence a secret. No one else can know what he has seen here." She paused and looked at Danny directly. "Can you do this?" she asked. "Can you carry this secret for the rest of your life?" Danny nodded. "I can," he said. Turned to her soldiers and gave orders in her own language. Several of them moved to escort toward the ship, but before she went, pulled away from them and turned back to Danny. She crossed the distance between them and threw her arms around him. Danny held her tight, this strange girl from the stars who had changed his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. "Thank you," whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you for everything." Danny smiled. "Take care of yourself out there," he said. Pulled back and looked at him with those enormous dark eyes. "I will not forget you," she said, "ever. And if you ever need me, I will come." She reached into a pouch at her side and pressed something into his hand. A small device, no larger than a coin, that pulsed with soft blue light. "If you need us," she said, "use this. I will know." Then she turned and walked toward the waiting ship. Danny watched her go, watched her climb aboard with the soldiers, watched the hatch close behind her. Paused before following. She looked back at Danny one last time. "You are an unusual human," she said. "Perhaps your species is more interesting than we believed." She almost smiled. "Perhaps it is time we reconsidered our isolation policies." Then she was gone, and the ships lifted off into the darkening sky, rising higher and higher until they were just points of light among the stars. Danny stood alone in the clearing. His cabin was burned. His life was forever changed. And somewhere in his pocket was a device that connected him to civilizations beyond imagination. He walked home through the dark forest, following paths he knew by heart. When he reached the ruins of his cabin, he sat down on the porch steps and looked up at the sky. The stars burned overhead, cold and distant and beautiful. Danny looked at them differently now. He knew there were people out there, whole worlds full of lives and stories. He knew that somewhere among those lights, a girl he had saved was looking back. For the first time since his wife had died, Danny did not feel alone. He stayed there for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead, the small blue device warm against his chest. Then he stood up, surveyed the damage to his cabin, and began to make plans. He had a lot of rebuilding to do. But that was all right. He had always been good at putting things back together.